The afternoon sun was waning as Thomas Graves approached the small, weather-beaten house on the edge of town. The sky overhead was a hazy gray, the light muted and heavy, as if reluctant to witness what was to come. He felt the familiar weight of dread settling in his chest as he raised a hand to knock on the door. When it opened, a woman stood there, her face pale, eyes shadowed with sleepless nights and unspoken sorrows. Sarah Whitman. She stepped aside wordlessly to let him in, the silence between them thick and fraught with unvoiced pain. The interior was modest, a few faded photographs pinned to the walls, and a worn sofa that had seen better days. Sarah motioned for him to sit, then retrieved a small bundle from a nearby table. Carefully, she unfolded it, revealing a photograph, a fragile, sepia-toned image of a young man standing on a rocky shore, the faded outline of the hotel looming distantly behind him. "That's my brother," she said quietly, her voice cracking. This was the last photo anyone took of him. He was supposed to be coming home that night. But he never did. Thomas reached out, his fingers brushing the edge of the photograph. The image was hauntingly familiar, the same derelict hotel he had seen in countless other missing persons pictures, always lurking in the background like a ghostly sentinel. He noticed the way the light in the photo seemed oddly muted, the hotel's outline almost trembling at the edges. "Can you tell me about the day this was taken?" Thomas asked gently. Sarah nodded, tears gathering. "He went down to the beach to take some pictures, said he needed to clear his head. We hadn't spoken much lately. I think he was troubled. That night, he sent me this photo, and then he was gone." Thomas kept his gaze fixed on her, sensing the depth of her grief. "Have you heard from anyone else who saw him that day, or noticed anything unusual?" She shook her head. "No. The town just. It's like everyone's afraid to talk about the hotel, like it's some kind of curse." That word, a curse, resonated deeply with Thomas. He had come here chasing shadows and whispers, but now the pieces were beginning to coalesce into something far darker than he had imagined. Later, back in his small rented room, Thomas laid out the photographs he had collected. Each one bore the same spectral hotel in the distance, a faded, crumbling edifice that seemed to be a silent witness to tragedy. He studied them carefully, noting subtle distortion, shadows that seemed to flicker unnaturally, faces blurred or stretched at the edges. It was as if the hotel itself was reaching out through the images, pulling at the souls of those who gazed upon it. The room was thick with the scent of salt and old paper. The quiet punctuated only by the soft click of his camera shutter as he rephotographed the images under different lights. With each flash, he caught fleeting shapes, ghostly silhouettes that vanished when he blinked. His heart pounded with a mixture of fear and fascination. Determined to see the hotel for himself, Thomas ventured down to the rocky shore as a storm gathered. The wind tore at his clothes, carrying the sharp tang of the sea and the distant cries of gulls. The hotel's outline stood stark against the tumultuous sky, a ghost-like presence that seemed to pulse with malevolence. He shivered, not from the cold, but from the unmistakable feeling that he was being watched. Returning to his room, Thomas was haunted by Sarah's story and the spectral images he had captured. His notes grew longer, his nights shorter, and the thin veil between reality and nightmare began to fray. He knew the hotel was at the heart of the disappearances, but what power did it hold? How did it trap its victims? And was he already caught in its grip? The questions spun relentlessly in his mind as he stared once more at the photographs, the faces frozen in time, the hotel looming ever present, and the creeping dread that he too might become just another lost soul, swallowed by the haunted frame. And as the night deepened, Thomas felt the first cold brush of something unseen slipping through the shadows, whispering his name on the wind. The investigation was far from over. In fact, it was only just beginning. The afternoon sun hung low over the coastal town as Thomas Graves made his way through the narrow, winding streets toward the outskirts where the locals claimed Old Man Carver resided. The air was thick with the salt tang of the sea, and the faint, chilling mist that seemed to seep from the shoreline itself. Thomas's steps echoed softly against the cobblestones, his worn leather shoes carrying the weight of a growing obsession. Each new lead, every whispered secret, seemed to draw him closer to the shadowed truth that haunted this town. Carver's cottage, a ramshackle structure leaning precariously against the rising wind, came into view. Its walls, weathered and grey, were overgrown with tangled ivy that clung desperately to the rotting wood beneath. The small windows, clouded with age and dust, barely reflected the dying light. Thomas hesitated for a moment, then knocked firmly on the battered door. The door creaked open, revealing a narrow hallway suffused with the scent of old paper, damp wood, and the unmistakable sharpness of sea spray carried in on the breeze. The interior was cramped and dim, shelves sagging under the weight of countless books, trinkets, and faded photographs. A fire flickered weakly in the hearth, casting dancing shadows that seemed to breathe with the room itself. From the dimness emerged old man Carver, a wiry figure with a face deeply etched by time and hardship. His eyes, bright and sharp despite the years, fixed immediately on Thomas with an intensity that both unsettled and intrigued. Dressed in a worn tweed jacket and a threadbare flat cap, Carver moved with surprising agility as he gestured for Thomas to sit by the fire. "So, you're the one poking around the hotel's shadow," Carver said, his voice low and gravelly, like stones tumbling over one another. "Not many have the courage or the foolishness to ask questions about that place anymore." Thomas nodded, his gaze steady. "I need to understand. There's a pattern, a curse maybe. Every missing person's last photograph shows the hotel. I want to know why." Carver chuckled, a dry, humorless sound. "The curse. It's older than you think. Older than most here remember." He leaned closer, the firelight illuminating the deep hollows of his face. "Long ago the hotel was a place of grander promises of refuge and joy by the sea. But tragedy struck. The original owner, a man named Gideon Morrow, was a man consumed by loss. His wife and child vanished under mysterious circumstances, and some say that grief shattered his mind. They say he bound his sorrow to the very walls of the hotel, a dark tether that twisted the place into something dreadful. The hotel became a prison, a liminal space where lost souls linger, drawn by the same desperation that consumed Gideon himself." Thomas felt a chill crawl up his spine as he listened, the old man's words painting scenes of sorrow and despair that seemed almost tangible. But why the photographs? Why do the missing always appear with the hotel in the background? Carver's eyes gleamed with a strange light, and he tapped his bony finger against the armrest. Because the hotel feeds on nostalgia, on longing for what is gone. It pulls the desperate in, trapping them in a nightmare woven from their own memories. The images you see are the last traces of those souls before they slip beyond our reach. A sudden gust of wind rattled the windows, and the candle flames flickered wildly, casting grotesque shadows that seemed to stretch and twist across the walls. Carver's voice dropped to a whisper. "Beware, Thomas. This place is hungry. It's always hungry." The fire crackled louder, and for a moment, the room seemed to pulse with an unseen energy. Thomas swallowed hard, the weight of the old man's words settling heavily on his mind. He realized that the hotel was more than just a building. It was a malevolent entity, a trap fashioned from despair and memory. As dusk slipped into night, Thomas rose to leave, the storm outside having grown fierce. The wind howled through the trees, and the salt spray stung his cheeks as he stepped back onto the path leading away from the cottage. The distant outline of the hotel loomed through the mist, a ghostly sentinel against the darkening sky. His thoughts churned with Carver's tales, each revelation tightening the grip of obsession and dread. Thomas knew the path ahead would be perilous, but the truth demanded pursuit. And somewhere within the shadowed halls of that cursed hotel, the answers and perhaps his own fate awaited. The night swallowed him as he disappeared into the swirling fog, the echoes of old legends trailing behind him like mournful whispers carried on the wind. The chill of the evening crept over the coastal town like a slow, unwelcome tide. Thomas Graves found himself drawn once more to the beach, the place where the hotel hung on the horizon like a ghostly sentinel, its faded silhouette swallowed by the thickening mist. The air was heavy with the scent of salt and damp earth, and the subdued roar of the sea mingled with the soft rustle of wind through the grasses. As the daylight faded, a subtle change settled over the world, a shift Thomas felt deep in his bones, as if the very fabric of reality were thinning. He stood motionless, eyes fixed on the spectral outline of the hotel, his camera hanging forgotten at his side. From the depths of the mist came a faint murmur, almost imperceptible, like whispered voices carried on the breeze. The words were unintelligible, but their tone was unmistakably mournful, laden with sorrow and longing. Thomas's heart quickened. A shiver raced down his spine. He wrapped his coat tighter around him, but the cold was not merely from the sea air. It was the creeping presence of something unseen, something that sought him out. Earlier that day, in the cramped, book-lined room of the local library, Evelyn Marsh had met him with a look that blended concern and wariness. Her delicate hands trembled slightly as she unfolded a brittle photograph, the edges yellowed with age. The image showed the hotel in its prime, standing proud against a clear sky. But faintly, almost imperceptibly, a translucent figure hovered near the building's edge, a pale, sorrowful shape caught between worlds. "No one likes to speak of it," Evelyn murmured, her voice low, as if afraid the walls themselves might overhear. "The hotel holds memories. Or perhaps souls that refuse to rest. They say it feeds on the past, on the regrets and grief of those who look upon it too long." Thomas absorbed her words, their weight settling heavily in his mind. Every step, deeper into the mystery, seemed to pull him further from the tangible world. His photographs, once clear and sharp, now bore strange anomalies, blurred edges, ghostly figures lurking just beyond the frame. It was as if the hotel reached out through the images, drawing him closer into its haunting embrace. That night, the town felt different. Thomas wandered the narrow streets beneath flickering street lamps that seemed to pulse with an unnatural rhythm. Shadows stretched and contracted, darting just beyond his peripheral vision, teasing and taunting. Time itself warped. Seconds dragged into minutes, and then snapped forward in sudden bursts. The ghostly apparitions appeared and vanished without warning, their presence both fleeting and persistent. He stopped abruptly as a chill breeze swept past, carrying the faint scent of aged wood and forgotten memories. A whisper brushed against his ear, a voice both familiar and alien, echoing from the depths of his own grief. Thomas closed his eyes, struggling to hold on to the fragments of reality slipping through his grasp. Days later, a confrontation with Detective Mark Halstead underscored the widening gulf between Thomas and the rest of the town. Halstead's pragmatic skepticism clashed sharply with Thomas's growing belief in the supernatural forces at play. The detective's voice was firm, but edged with frustration. His brow furrowed as he urged Thomas to reconsider his obsession. "This isn't some ghost story, Graves," Halstead said, his tone more wary than angry. "People are disappearing, yes, but we need facts, evidence, not fantasies." Thomas met his gaze, wary and haunted. "And what if the facts are hidden in the shadows you refuse to see? What if the truth isn't bound by your logic?" Their words hung heavy between them, a chasm widening with every passing day. Evelyn watched from the sidelines, her eyes shadowed with worry. She knew the price of delving too deeply into the hotel's secrets, a price Thomas was teetering on the edge of paying. As the shadows lengthened across the town, so too did Thomas's isolation. The hotel's influence tightened its grip, pulling him inexorably closer to its spectral heart. The whispers grew louder, the visions more vivid, and the line between past and present, reality and nightmare, blurred beyond recognition. And somewhere within that shifting haze, the hotel waited patient, hungry, eternal. The night deepened, and Thomas's breath misted in the cold air. The hotel loomed just beyond the reach of his vision, a fading beacon in the swirling fog. He took a hesitant step forward, the weight of unseen eyes pressing upon him. How much longer could he resist the pull? How many more shadows would need to lengthen before he became just another lost soul, trapped forever in the hotel's cursed embrace? The answer was veiled in the mist, whispered on the wind, and captured in the fading light of the photograph that was yet to be taken. And so, with trembling resolve, Thomas moved deeper into the night, the shadows lengthening all around him. The rain hammered insistently against the stained glass windows of the town archive, the dull roar of the storm outside a stark contrast to the eerie silence that filled the cramped room. Thomas Graves sat hunched over a rickety wooden desk, a single lamp casting a pool of jaundiced light across a collection of brittle papers and worn books. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the fragile pages of a diary, its leather cover cracked and faded, the ink blurred in places by age and damp. The diary belonged to the hotel's original owner, a man named Elijah Harrow, whose name Thomas had encountered repeatedly in his research, but whose story had remained frustratingly elusive. Each entry was a window into a past steeped in sorrow, desperation, and a creeping madness that seemed to seep from the words themselves. June 14, 1927, Thomas read aloud softly, his voice barely more than a whisper. The sea has not been kind these past weeks. Guests grow restless, their laughter hollow, their eyes shadows of fear. I dare not leave the premises after dark. Something stirs beyond the cliffs, a chill that gnaws at the soul. A sudden clap of thunder shook the building, and Thomas flinched, his pulse quickening. He pressed on, drawn deeper into the tale. Over the following pages, Elijah chronicled the slow unraveling of his sanity, the inexplicable disappearances of visitors, and the growing sense that the hotel itself was alive, feeding on the memories and regrets of those who crossed its threshold. When Thomas reached the entry dated October 3, 1927, his breath caught. My wife has left me. The despair that clings to these walls is no longer mine alone. I fear I have doomed this place and all who enter it. If these pages survive, let them be a warning. The hotel is a prison, a liminal space where time folds and souls are trapped, forever caught between what was and what might have been. The weight of Elijah's words settled heavily on Thomas' shoulders. Here was the genesis of the curse, a despair so profound it tainted the very fabric of the hotel, ensnaring anyone who glimpsed it through the lens of a camera or the eye of the mind. Later that evening, Thomas met with Evelyn Marsh in the cozy confines of the town library. The low hum of the heating system mingled with the faint rustle of turning pages as Evelyn adjusted her glasses and studied the diary alongside him. Elijah Harrow's story is one the town has tried to bury, she said quietly, her voice thick with emotion. His wife's departure was the catalyst, but the real horror began when he vanished without a trace. People whispered that the hotel swallowed him whole. Thomas nodded, his eyes distant, and the disappearances since then. A cycle, Evelyn replied. The hotel feeds on nostalgia and despair. It traps those who dare to remember too deeply or cling too tightly to the past. Their conversation was interrupted by a knock at the door. Old man Carver entered, his presence as imposing as ever despite his frail frame. His eyes gleamed with a knowing light as he settled near the fireplace, the flames casting flickering shadows across his lined face. "You're poking at things better left alone," he warned, voice gravelly but steady. "That hotel's no mere building, it's a curse forged from a broken heart and bitter memories. It hungers, lad, and it's patient." Thomas listened intently as Carver wove tales of vanished travelers, spectral figures glimpsed in the mist, and a darkness that devoured hope itself. The old man's stories added layers of dread and gravity to the puzzle Thomas was trying desperately to solve. As the night deepened, Thomas found himself alone once more, staring out at the ghostly outline of the hotel through rain-streaked windows. The building seemed less like a ruin and more like a sentinel watching over the town's secrets, its presence a silent reminder of the inescapable past. He felt the curse's pull tightening around him, a cold grip that whispered of despair and loss. Yet within that darkness, a spark of determination flickered. If the hotel was a prison, then understanding its origins was the first step toward breaking free. Thomas turned back to the diary, the fragile pages now a lifeline in the gathering storm. The threads of tragedy and torment were unraveling before him, and with each revelation came both clarity and deeper unease. The hotel was no mere backdrop, it was the heart of the nightmare, its malevolent presence a living thing that fed on the restless souls caught in its web. And Thomas knew with chilling certainty that his own thread was now woven irrevocably into the tapestry of the curse. As the clock in the town square chimed midnight, Thomas made a silent vow. He would delve deeper into the shadows, confront the past head-on, and fight against the dark legacy that threatened to consume them all. But with every step forward, the hotel's grasp grew tighter, and the line between reality and nightmare blurred further into a haunting, nostalgia-tinged abyss. The storm outside began to abate, but within Thomas, a tempest raged on one that would not be quelled until the secrets of the hotel were laid bare, or he became yet another lost soul swallowed by its spectral embrace. Thomas Graves had never truly believed in the supernatural, at least not in the way the locals seemed to fear. Yet, as he stood on the jagged cliffs overlooking the restless sea, the old hotel's silhouette blurred in the thickening mist, something inside him shifted. The crashing waves below carried a hollow timbre, a mournful cadence that seemed to echo the whispers haunting his mind. The hotel was no longer just a distant relic in a photograph. It had become a living presence pressing in on his senses. Earlier that day, the boundaries between reality and illusion had begun to dissolve. Thomas had returned to the cramped room he rented above the town's small inn, hoping to find some clarity amid his growing obsession. The walls, lined with peeling wallpaper patterned with faded floral motifs, seemed to breathe and pulse with an unnatural rhythm. In his hands, the scattered photographs of the missing trembled as if alive, faces merging and shifting with spectral shadows. He blinked, trying to steady his vision, but the room warped. The faces of the lost appeared and vanished, their eyes pleading silently. One photograph in particular caught his gaze, the last known image of his old friend, Michael, who had vanished years ago under eerily similar circumstances. The hotel appeared there too, faint and ghost-like in the background. Thomas's breath hitched as the room grew colder, the shadows lengthening until they almost overtook him. Memories surged unbidden, Michael's laughter on a sun-drenched afternoon, their shared discussions about unexplained phenomena, the day he disappeared without a trace. Thomas's heart clenched with a sorrow that the years had never dulled. The hotel's curse was no longer an abstract mystery, but a personal torment threatening to consume him. The next morning, Thomas met with Evelyn Marsh at the town library, hoping the familiar sanctuary might anchor his fraying mind. Evelyn's sharp eyes softened with concern when she noticed his pale complexion and the trembling hands that clutched a battered leather-bound journal. "Thomas," she said gently, "you are pushing yourself too hard. The hotel's history is dark, but you must guard your own spirit." He nodded, though inside he felt the weight of despair pulling him deeper. Detective Mark Halstead's skeptical presence loomed in the background, a reminder of the rational world that still resisted the creeping shadows. Yet, even Halstead's pragmatism could not deny the strange occurrences surrounding the hotel. As evening fell, Thomas found himself alone once more, the fog curling around the hotel like spectral fingers. His mind unraveled further when an apparition appeared, Michael's face, flickering like a candle flame in a drafty room, speaking in riddles about lost memories and unfinished stories. The line between past and present, life and death, blurred into a haunting tapestry woven by the hotel's malevolent will. Thomas realized that his emotional vulnerability was the hotel's weapon, a key to unlocking the prison of souls trapped within its walls. But deep within that torment lay a fragile thread of hope, a chance to confront the despair and perhaps break the cycle. As the night deepened, Thomas's resolve hardened. He would not succumb to the fading boundaries of reality. Whatever horrors awaited, he would face them head-on. The past was not dead. It was a living shadow, and he was determined to chase it to its end, even if it meant losing himself entirely. Outside, the hotel stood silent, watching, waiting. And somewhere in the distance, the wind carried the faintest echo of a photograph's whisper, promising that the nightmare was far from over.